Namaskar and welcome to Sansad Television. I am Vishal Dahiya and you're watching our show Perspective, where we bring you detailed analysis of all key national and international issues. So today we're going to talk about the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict. In fact, it has been 6 months since Russian forces launched an invasion of Ukraine in February this year. This conflict has now turned into a grinding campaign of daily airstrikes and battles with no clear endgame in the sight. Both sides have sustained punishing losses of lives and materials, property as well, but neither appears willing to consider a ceasefire. Now, much of the Ukraine's east and south are under Russia's control. Meanwhile, United States of America, UK and European Union have unleashed sweeping sanctions against the Russian government and its President Vladimir Putin. Experts also point out that energy crisis and food insecurity is also brewing in several parts of the world due to this ongoing conflict. So what is next in the Russia-Ukraine conflict and how and when can this come to an end? To try and understand all aspects, we have with us a distinguished panel of experts. Let me first introduce them to you, beginning with, we are joined by Dhruv Katoch, who is here with us in the studio, is Director of India Foundation. Welcome to Sansad Television Studios, Mr. Katoch. We're also joined by former Ambassador Anil Trigunayat and retired Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, who is a strategic expert. Welcome both of you as well, gentlemen. General Katoch, let's start by understanding the basics first, and all of us have been keeping a track and watching on our television screens, reading it in newspapers, through social media platforms as well. This ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine, and there seems to be no end in sight. Both sides seem to be, still clearly of the mind that we will continue it. Is that what it is?
Well, Vishal, apparently the way it is going now, that appears to be so. But logically, when we look at the war which is going on, logically we can say it's a war between Russia and Ukraine. But that is not how logic operates. Because in a real sense, what is being fought out over Ukrainian territory is a battle between the United States and Russia. And the US and Britain is in effect using Ukrainian forces, Ukrainian civilians to fight the Russians. Now, as far as the US is concerned, they are achieving their strategic objectives. As far as the Russians are concerned, I think they have achieved all the tactical objectives which they sought out to do. But the sufferer in this is Ukraine, because they have lost out very heavily, and under no circumstances are they going to retrieve any bit of the lost territory which the US and the UK are trying to tell them that it can be brought back. No. A new status quo has arrived. The maps have changed. And even now, if Zelensky does not see the writing on the wall, he is going to lose out further. And I think Odessa will also slip from his grasp, which at the moment he's controlling. But if he loses Odessa, then that means the entire Black Sea coast will be under Russian control, and Ukraine will have no access to the sea. Now, that is the larger danger. I think the President Zelensky wanted to settle at some point of time, but there is a great deal of pressure on him from the US and UK.
There were efforts in almost around 3-4 months into the conflict of a ceasefire talk, but they didn't go anywhere.
Ultimately, if you are looking at a solution, I'm not sure whether it is going to come about, and we can speak about that later. But the only solution which I can see is a rapprochement between Russia and Ukraine, where the existing status quo is maintained.
Okay.
Russia is not going to give back. The Crimea was, of course, always Russia's. But they are not going to give back the Donbass, and they will not give back Mariupol, because that gives them a land access to Crimea. So with that, they have got adequate control over the Black Sea, which is what they wanted.
Okay.
So the Russian interests are there, and I think it is up to Zelensky now to save his country from further bloodshed.
Okay. General Kulkarni, looks like it is a classic stalemate situation, as General Katoch is also referring to it. Russia seems to be in no mood to let go of the territories which it has occupied during this particular conflict. Ukraine and its President Zelensky, seems to be, agreeing to no less than taking back all these territories. So none of the sides seem to be even moving an inch forward when we're talking about finding a solution here.
Absolutely, Vishal. Firstly, thank you very much for inviting me on Sansad Television. But what you're saying is absolutely right. Tremendous amount of surprises have come up in this particular invasion by Russia of Ukraine. Whoever expected Russia would take so long? Whoever expected Zelensky will hold on to such a long man? A showman has become a statesman for the whole world. Everybody thought Putin would be able to take Ukraine in just about a week or 10 days, but it hasn't happened. Now, the whole problem is who underestimated? Everybody underestimated the Ukrainians. Definitely. I think Ukrainian is on total life support, external support, and high morale, which has kept Ukraine in the battle zone. The Russians, everybody thought sanctions will crumble Russia, Russia will not be able to come out of it, and the economy will collapse, and Russia will see the light of the day. It hasn't happened. Ruble has stabilized. Energy economy for the Russians has risen very high. There's hardly any unemployment in Russia. Russian economy seems to be going up. The world is looking at Russia for energy. The world is looking at Russia for the food crisis to be resolved. Turkey is stepping in. Under these circumstances, I don't think anybody at this point of time, it is very, very difficult to say that in these first 6 months, who have they gone to? Has it gone to Russians or has it gone to the Ukrainians? Okay. The Russians have occupied approximately about 15% of the Ukrainian territory. And that Ukrainian territory is the agriculture bowl. That Ukrainian territory is the entire resources, the iron ore, all of it is there. You find a risk of the nuclear war or a nuclear crisis is likely to be with Zaporizhzhia over there. You find that Ukrainians might get, like what General Kator said, get totally landlocked if Odessa falls and Mariupol having already gone to them. The kind of counter-offensive which the Ukrainians are planning on both at Kharkiv and Kherson, you find the Donbas region, which the Russians had a toehold, have a foothold. The entire Donbas, both Luhansk and Donetsk region are in total control of the Russians. Okay. Under these circumstances, with Kyiv, everybody thought Kyiv is going to fall in just about maybe 7 days, 10 days, nothing. Kyiv is holding on to itself. The Ukrainians have really shown the resolve, number one. What everybody thought of Zelensky as a showman has turned out to be a statesman. Okay. Putin, who thought that he would be able to take the entire Ukraine in a shot, it hasn't happened. The world thought that they would be able to put Russia in a tight corner by the sanctions. It hasn't happened. The Americans kept warning everybody that the Russians are invading Ukraine. Nothing happened. The NATO, all of it wanting to do something, couldn't do. The energy crisis in Germany, France, Italy, the Nord Stream 2, everybody is wanting it. It may or may not happen. You find this kind of support that Putin has got from Indonesia, China, even India, and the kind of the support that it has got even from some of the African countries. You find a little divide even in the European countries. In such a situation, I think we really don't know what is going to happen in the next 6 months. Probably the severe winter which comes may be able to say whether the Europeans have been able to hold on.
Indeed. There'll be a crucial period, General Kulkarni. You're right there. Let me bring in Ambassador Trigunath also. Ambassador Trigunath, as General Katos was pointing out in his initial response, the larger question, there is a conflict going on. There is a war going on between Russia and Ukraine. But the larger issues involved behind this conflict of, the geopolitics involved, the regional politics involved. How do you see? Because on those issues also, there doesn't seem to be any forward movement from both sides. Both sides seem to be very, very keeping, the same stance as they have been since February onwards.
Well, thank you, Vishal. In fact, I fully agree with what General Katot and General Kulkarni have said about the ongoing war, the situation. But, this is a war with a difference. And as was mentioned earlier, this is not a war between Russia and Ukraine. This is actually a war between Russia and the United States, and which will have far-reaching repercussions for the way the global transitional world order eventually emerges. And that is the bigger worry. The war can stop tomorrow if the Americans are on board. They are not on board. Zelensky had said that he would like to be neutral. Russia has no problem with Ukraine becoming a European Union member or an associate member, but not a NATO member. So there are certain red lines that have been crossed by both sides. Nobody can justify the Russian invasion. That is a given. But at the same time, what we are seeing today is a sort of a stalemate. And this can only happen because, see, these Europeans or Americans, they are also on tenterhooks at the moment. The economies are really doing badly, even though the Americans might be earning and their arms industry or weapons industry is gaining ground or coming out of it because of the orders being placed hugely by the Europeans and others, or for that matter, the NATO may have coalesced a little better. But when it comes to the ground reality, especially during the winters, already there is a lot of, if you travel in Europe, and I was just there this week, and you see the kind of worry that the average people have it, and those are democracies, and in the democracies, you know that the people can go either way, and that is what there is a major problem. Now, Ukraine, whose war is Ukrainian war? That is something that it seems like the Americans have completely miscalculated. Putin also miscalculated a great deal when he was going into Ukraine. Possibly, as somebody said, that he could have got in 1 week or 10 days, but no war. I mean, and frankly, the wars fought by all these superpowers have been defeated. They have been defeated, every single one of them. You look at the Americans, they lost in Vietnam, they lost in Afghanistan. Britishers lost in Afghanistan. The Chinese lost in Vietnam. The Soviets lost in Afghanistan. And now they are not going to win this war as well. So it is how you. But at the moment, I think that the worst situation is being created by the external powers, as has always been the case, by the geopolitics and the geoeconomics of it. But what is going to come out, in my view, is going to be far worse. And that is that the Sino-Russian Entente, which has been increasing a great deal, will lead to some kind of a Cold War 2.0, where you will see the financial architecture being completely changed. And we will have a much worse kind of scenario than existed in the Cold War 1.0.
Okay. Now, that's a very important point where Mr. Sirgunath has concluded his comment. But another interesting aspect of this, and since we're talking about what will happen now, everybody is interested. Those who are immediate stakeholders in this conflict, and those of us who are not so immediate, but of course feeling the ripple effects as well. But the question here is, General Katoch, and that is, few months down the line, if the stalemate continues, will the Western allies of Ukraine be able to continue the kind of support which they are giving Ukraine right now? That's one. Two, on the Russian side, will Russia be able to sustain the onslaught of sanctions for that much longer period? Now, these are two very important questions, of course, and that is what is more important, other than the casualties on the ground, be it civilian or military personnel.
Well, Vishal, on the first point, I think, in my personal view, the war is already over. Russia has won this war, period. So, but they have not won the peace. I think that's the more important aspect. So now what we are going to see is a different phase which has started, which we can call the phase of terrorism. Now, what the Ukrainians are doing is they are using things like drones, and they are dropping mines into areas which are held by the Russians. Now, it is becoming a very difficult situation for the Russians in that manner. So while they have won the war in the way I look at a war, we are not going to see a conventional fighting anymore. We are going to see fighting at the sub-conventional level, and this is going to continue. It is something like what happened in Afghanistan, to put it into a different sort of language. So this area is becoming something like in Afghanistan for the Russians. To sustain something of that nature for the Europeans is not going to be very difficult, because you are looking at it at the sub-conventional level. We are not looking at heavy armaments, etc. So I think the West can support something like this.
But the continuing energy prices,
I want to come on to that.
Out there.
Now, what the West will not be able to survive is the energy crisis. I heard very strange statements emanating from Europe, which were saying that Russia is weaponizing gas. But the whole point is Europe and the United States have weaponized finances, they have weaponized the sanctions, they have weaponized everything. So obviously it is in order that the Russians will weaponize whatever they can weaponize. Europe is going to go in for a very, very difficult time, but the Russians are going to hold on. There is no way in which Russian public opinion, I'm not talking about President Putin now, I'm talking about the Russian public opinion will accept any backing down from now. So
Okay.
they will hold on to what they've got. The Donbass is over, Mariupol is over, and if the Ukrainians still don't see the writing on the wall, they will lose Odessa. At the moment, I don't think the Russians are very keen to take Odessa, but they will lose it. So now it depends on how long you want the stalemate to continue. I think Europe will finally tell the United States this far and no further. And once they do that, I think we are going to come to some form of a stalemate and the status quo will be maintained. But as of now, what you are witnessing is a low-cost insurgency or terrorism, as you call it, which can continue for 6 months or it can continue for 6 years. It is unending.
Okay. Okay. General Kulkarni, do you agree with General Katoch out there that from here onwards, the issue is at what cost or where exactly the lines will be drawn to, reach an peace agreement from both sides? And this does not only include Russia and Ukraine as the stakeholders. Right. This also includes, other Western powers also.
Would do, or what the Western world would want to do, is to bleed Russia. And that is what their attempt would now be, because the Russians are in control of 15% of the Ukraine territory, which is the territory because that is the agricultural bowl, the resources, the iron ore, even Zaporozhye, the nuclear plant, everything is in the Russian control. So per se, you can say, yes, Russia has got what it wanted, not the entire Ukraine. But the Russians are fighting the Slavic people. They're the same sort of people and the same set of people which are fighting one another. The Russians also, about 20% of the Russians in Russia also now seem to feel that, well, it's over now. I think the whole world should realize it. But the question is, will the West, which has now, Americans have given $6 billion as aid to Ukraine. What? Just see the kind of weaponry, from Harpoon coastal defense to Javelin anti-tank missiles to drones to high artillery mobility service vehicles, tactical vehicles, surveillance, all the way it took out Moscow in the Black Sea. All this is indicative that if you look back again at a point of time when the Americans when it was Cold War, Americans wanted to balance the Soviet Union by engaging the Chinese. Today, the Chinese have also come up in a big way. So it is a new world order in which the Americans have to now engage Russia and China. So the Russians will be bleeded by the Americans as far as they can, and the Chinese will slowly and steadily, with the trade sanctions, will be sorted out. So the American game or the Western game would be to ensure that in the world order, they could not be seen as riffraffs. If anybody and everybody, even if the Russians and the Chinese do collide and do go together, which is very, very difficult, because at one point of time when the Americans were engaging with the Chinese in the 70s, the Chinese never saw eye to eye with the Soviet Union. So under the new circumstances, the new world order, where Russia and China might stay together with Americans, and in a triangle in which the Americans are all set, the Ukrainians, 10.5 million refugees in other countries, almost the equal number of people displaced in Ukraine. The casualties, almost about 9 to 10,000 Ukrainians dead, almost the same number of Russians dead. So you find that there's a lot that Russia has to lose. There's a lot that the Ukrainians have almost lost the war. There's nothing left in Ukraine. The Russia, the image, now the prestige, the Russians, of course, have energy, which they will use to the best of their advantage. The Russian economy will not collapse as everybody thought. The Russians are now the food exporters. They're no longer the importers, which China is looking at it differently as to how far can they go. So in this new world order, I agree with General Katoch, whether it is 6 weeks or 6 years or hereinafter, until there's something, you find the way the nuclear start talks and everything will collapse. Now it's absolutely a new world order in which where Russia stands, where China stands, where India plays a role, which is the Western world, how does the USA now play its cards, all of it. And Ukraine is a test bed for the Americans. They will make sure that the Russians bleed. The Russians will make sure that the energy crisis in the European world is as severe as it can be. So finally, everybody will have to say, okay, let's give it up. But then giving up which way? The Russians have already occupied what they wanted in Ukraine. Now, would the Russians give up that? Well, definitely not. Why would they lose so many men? Why would they lose so much of equipment? Why would they lose the world prestige by going into this kind of a thing? So the Russians are not going to give up what they have it in Ukraine. The Ukrainians will not be able to survive on the Western support as long as they wish to. So Ukrainians have to build, but they have lost all of the real Ukrainian agriculture bowl. They have lost the sea coast. They would have lost. They would have lost the entire natural resources over there. So it's a very difficult situation.
Indeed.
They are in for a real new world order in which one has to really cannot predict right now.
Indeed, it's completely a situation where making easier predictions would be not possible. But Mr. Tirgunat, do you agree that now the question is who blinks first? But again, on that also, another additional question would be that what would be the reasons behind that, blinking, which will happen from either sides, either the Western side, Western powers, the allies of Ukraine or Russia?
Well, I don't think we will see anyone blinking first in this, especially because it's a game of perceptions. And as you know, that this particular war, and apart from the financial, or rather weaponizing the financial instruments or energy, one more important thing that has been is the most intense play of the information war game between the two sides. And that warfare has really taken the cake in this. So therefore, blinking first, I don't see the Putin at least doing that. And Zelensky has this heroic instinct which is being pumped up by the Western countries. I mean, I remember in the beginning, somebody in the US had made a comment, a very senior person, that we will fight the Russians to the last Ukrainian. Now, if that has been their approach, so they can keep on pumping small arms or whatever kind of missiles and this and try to bleed Russia. But what Russia has done is it has been preparing since at least the last 10 years. And it knows very well that the sanctions is the game or the first hand of the Western system. The only thing, and at any drop of a hat, they indulge in these kind of primary sanctions, secondary sanctions, tertiary sanctions against everybody. I mean, that is the game of the West. So Putin, very well, being a strategic man himself, understood that will happen. So from 2014, when he took over Crimea, he has been working on it, how to counter those. And we have seen, first thing the Americans did was took away all the money that the Russians had in their banks, cut them out of the SWIFT. But then what is Russia doing? It is trying to make them pay $1 billion a day. I mean, this is the kind of situation that we are seeing. So it has not only pumped up its own ruble, which was 130, it has become 55 to $1 now. So it has increased. Of course, he has also garnered the public support. And when we look at the Russians' perspective, I mean, Russians may have miscalculated as far as Ukrainians are concerned because they are the same people. So their resistance at the grassroots level is something that maybe Putin did not take into account to his own discredit. But at the same time, the West does not understand the Russians and their capacity to take adversity. That is another thing. But today, Russia feels stronger. And of course, the weakness, no war can be, if you don't win a war within 2 weeks, 3 weeks, then it is just a prolonged battle. It continues here and there with different kind of means. And nobody is a winner in that war. That is the fact. But the whole world is a loser in this.
Indeed.
And unfortunately, that's what we are looking at today.
Okay. Indeed. Thank you so much, Mr. Tirgunat, General Kulkarni, and General Katoch as well for sharing your views and insight. As our experts were pointing out, there is no winner in a war, but this ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine seems to have reached a clear stalemate. Both sides seemingly are not willing to back down from their respective stands as of now. And this is leading to a larger crisis in terms of energy crisis for the Western world, for the countries in the European Union, and of course, Russia fighting off the sanctions posted against it by USA, UK and the EU. So we'll keep a close watch on all the developments here on this issue and various others as well, and keep on bringing you all the details. Till then, keep watching Sansad Television. Thank you.